Hello, good morning, everybody. If it's morning when you're watching this, I'm Michael Gross, and I'm going to talk to you guys today about abortion, the morality of it, kind of the different sides of it, and just a whole kind of everything, right? Is it right or wrong, as you can see here. So I want to minimize this. You won't see me much longer. I'm just going to show you my slides here, my presentation. We'll talk about it. And, that'll be that. So let's get started. So like I said, we're going to talk about abortion. Is it right or wrong? We're gonna go over different abortion viewpoints, pro-life, pro-choice. We're gonna go over an interview I had with my friend Brittany, who is a pro-lifer, and we're gonna go over the knowledge I gained from that discussion, along with my viewpoint on abortion itself, whether I think it's right or wrong. All right, so let's get started on the different viewpoints on abortion. Right, so we have pro-life and pro-choice are the main two. So we're gonna go straight into pro-life here. So pro-life is an objectivist moral standpoint on abortion. For pro-lifers, it's always wrong to kill, it's always wrong to abort. There really is no middle ground if you're a pro-lifer. So it's important for them to discuss life and when life begins, because obviously to kill or murder, it has to be life. And for them, as in most pro-lifers, life begins at conception. And the Minnesota Citizens Concerned for Life define the moment life begins as at fertilization or conception, when a sperm cell fuses with an oocyte or egg to produce a new human organism. And that definition is from 2019. Again, so for them, at conception, that's when life begins. And again, that's really important because for life to begin, that means if you're aborting, you're committing murder or killing. And the reason that's important, we kind of go into is religious views. So a lot of pro-lifers are very religious in the Christian sense of the word. And so for them, the sixth commandment of the Bible is you shall not commit murder, shall not kill. And again, if life begins at conception, you are breaking that commandment by aborting, which kind of falls into the divine command theory. So basically, that all morality is defined from a divine being or divinity, in this case, the Christian God. And Johnston goes so far as to declare that there are no exceptions to the divine ordinance against intentionally killing innocent people, and to fancy exceptions to usurp God's rule and set up a counterfeit moral standard after Lucifer's example. He, along with many other pro-life, can't believe that our ethical standing is derived from divine command theory. And there's another group, not everybody in pro-life is a divine command theorist in that they follow God's rule of law. Some of them fall under more of a natural law theorist type of thing. And for them, morality comes from life. And it's important to define that because they're saying without life, you can have no morality. Pryor states a little bit more eloquently than I can. He says, because without life, by which I mean life in and of itself, not quality of life, although also important, is lower on the hierarchy of needs, there cannot be moral will. Again, without life, you have no moral will. So to abort life, to get rid of life, you get rid of all moral will and morality. So that's kind of the pro-life side of it. That kind of sums that up. So going on to the pro-choice side, see here you have a picture of Senator Quigley in 2017 holding a Trust Women sign. And for him, he's showing, along with a lot of the pro-choice side, that women's choice, women's rights are kind of what matters in this debate, not so much the fetus's life. And to get into that, we're going to talk about like the women's rights versus fetus rights for them. And Williams says a fetus can be a human life without having the same rights as a woman in whose body it resides. She's the boss. Her life and what's right for her circumstances and her health should automatically trump the rights of the non-autonomous entity inside of her, always. And so that's really important, right? So for pro-choice, it's really important that women have the right to do what they want with their body. It is their body after all, and that their rights surpass the right of the fetus inside of them. And it's important here to know too that they're not saying that the fetus doesn't have rights or that it isn't a life. To them, they're not saying that. They're saying that its will to live, its moral rights are lower than that of women who are living. And that's important because of equality in society. Obviously, we know that women haven't always had equality in our country. And so abortion rights are a huge part in women's rights. And Felt here says, over the past 50 years, women have gained an astonishing amount of power. And Roe v. Wade, which gave women control over their fertility, was another major step towards empowerment. Not only did it legalize abortion, but it became a symbol of our independence because reproductive freedom is fundamental to a woman's aspirations, to education, financial stability, and self-determination. And Donegan kind of emphasizes that further by saying it's necessary for women to be complete citizens, truly equal in freedom and opportunity to men. So again, pro-choice isn't about killing or a lack of importance for the life of the fetus. It's more about women's rights, their will and right to choose. And it's really important for them to have that. And so looking at that, we're going to look at how sharply divided our country's been over the last, I want to say this is 13 years here. I'm sorry, 16 years. I think this goes all the way back to 2003. This is pulled from Cole here in 2019 and Statistica.com. And you can kind of see how closely divided our country is constantly over this issue. It's hard for people to pick a side. Let me rephrase that. It's hard for people to sway people from one side to another. And it's important to both sides that they're right. It's important for women to have their rights. It's important for fetuses to have their rights, for life to live. And so you can see this country is very sharply divided. And I just want to show you guys that. So moving on from that, we're going to look at the interview I had with Brittany. She's a self-proclaimed pro-lifer. And we're going to get into these questions here. We're going to start off with, why are you pro-life? I asked her that. She said, because she believes in responsibility, even in unplanned pregnancies. So for her, responsibility is the key to pro-life, right? So she's not saying women shouldn't choose, but she's saying women should choose responsibility, which would be pro-life. I then asked her if she believes that the life of a fetus has equal rights to that of a pregnant mother. Why and why not? She said that she thinks a fetus does not have equal rights, and therein lies the problem. It should, and to call the carrier of the fetus a mother would be to assume responsibility. Therefore, the child developing should have rights. And I kind of want to stop here for a second and kind of emphasize this to you guys. When you're asking questions of people and interviewing people, it's very important to look at the wording of your question. I didn't think too much of saying pregnant mother when I asked this question. However, the word mother, so Brittany indicated a woman who should have a moral compass and moral compassion for the fetus inside of her. That was not my intent with the question. However, because I used the word mother, it drove that, as you saw in her response. So again, it's really important to think about the phrasing of your questions. I just kind of want to touch on that. Sorry, I know it's a little off topic. So the next question I asked is, should abortion carry the same legal ramifications as murder? Why or why not? This is something that I felt like was an important question, because if you're pro-life, you're saying that life exists at a conception or whenever, that you're saying you're killing or murdering, is that the same legal thing then? And to her, she said this is a gray area. She said, without getting too far into the matter, she cannot judge a woman for getting an abortion because I do not know her circumstances. I am a pro-life and pro-responsibility, but I also think it is not her place to judge. She do wish more people would practice responsibility and own up to said responsibility, however which way it manifests. But that isn't the case in today's society. However, with that said, there is no excuse to get a full-term abortion, and she believes if you get a full-term abortion, that should be considered murder, especially among people who advocate for it. The next question, at what point during pregnancy do you feel like life begins? For her, it was the point of heartbeat. It is important to note that for this question, I defined life as an entity that has legal and moral right to live. So not just, oh, it's life, like a plant has life, but a moral and legal right to live. And for her, that was a heartbeat. Is there any instance where you believe that abortion is acceptable? She said, in short, yes. Again, she is not God. It isn't her place to judge, and thank goodness I don't have to judge his job, or do his job, sorry. She believes that she has a moral responsibility to uphold, but in matter of abortion, it is not her job to enforce. That is, again, God's will, and she shouldn't force women to raise a child without a proper system that would be willing to take in and raise newborns, especially without asking women who has poor health to risk her life, or if she was raped. Also, she says that such things should be left between her and God, the woman carrying and God. And the last question I asked is, what should mothers do who have had an abortion? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. What should mothers who would have had an abortion do if they were not legally able to do so? And here again, I want to emphasize, I'm talking about if it was illegal here in the United States to have an abortion, or let's say in the state I live in, Georgia, if it was illegal in Georgia to have an abortion, what should that mother do if she wanted to have an abortion or felt like she needed to because of life-threatening circumstances, things of that nature? And Brittany said, in her opinion, many people go to Mexico for surgery already because it's cheaper than in the US. And then she hates to say it, but if state law prohibits abortion, then either move to a new state where rights are more validated or plan for adoption. And so for her, again, the whole thing was talking about responsibility. Brittany said that responsibility is key and paramount. And she wanted to emphasize that when she was 17, she found out she was pregnant and that she was nowhere near ready to be a mother. Um, but she stuck with it. You know, she made a mistake in that she didn't use protection, became pregnant at a young age, but had the baby. She said that was her responsibility as a woman, as a human. She wishes more people would practice responsibility, whether it's raising your child or simply practicing safe sex, or just keep your hands to yourself. But the only way, again, she wants to emphasize that she thinks abortion should be considered murder is a full term. So moving on, we're going to talk about the things that I learned from this interview. So I always thought that pro-lifers were divine command theorists. I thought that they only went off the law or word of God. As you saw with this interview I had with Brittany, that isn't always the case, right? So Brittany, although she believes in divine command theory, not so much in her ability to tell people what to do. She thinks that humans shouldn't prevent other humans from doing what humans do, that it's God's place to judge. And I thought that was very interesting. And also, I learned that for everybody, life doesn't begin at conception. So, at least in the pro life camp. So, I think this is important because if you're going to say life begins at a heartbeat, which I believe is around 6 or 7 weeks in utero, that using the morning after pill, for example, would not be considered murderous or killing. And so, again, I think that's important to define when life is. And I thought it was very interesting that for Brittany, that life was defined at when the heart beats. And so let's look at my standpoint, my viewpoint on abortion. I'm kind of just in a gray area, just so you know. I don't believe that as a man, I have the right to tell any woman what to do with her body. But at the same time, I personally feel like life is important, even an unborn life, and that we should protect life. And that's kind of what we're going to get into here, right? So I believe that abortion is immoral, in line with natural law theory, and that the existence of life must be allowed to prosper if able. And here, there's some things you see here: abuse, rape, life, and deformities. And so I'm going to talk about these really quick, but these are kind of some of the caveats to that, right? So I don't always think that abortion is wrong. In the case of abuse, for example, my wife, when she was 17, dating some guy, she was pregnant, and he threatened to murder her and the baby if she gave birth. So she chose not to. She chose to abort the child for her life's sake and for the sake of the child, because to her it wasn't a child yet, and it was better to just end it before it would be a full-born, living, breathing child, and just end up there, just to prevent suffering. And again, in those cases, I think whether married or dating or whatever, I think that that should be allowed. It's not my place or anybody's place, in my opinion, to say, no, you have to suffer, have that baby, and put your own life in danger. That's not okay. And same thing with rape. Rape is an atrocious thing. It's something that should never happen in society. Unfortunately, we know it does. And if that unfortunate thing were to result in a pregnancy, I don't think any woman should have to carry through and have that. I don't want to say trophy, but trophy is not the right word. That, I'm sorry, I lost the word here. That burden, we'll say that burden. She shouldn't have to carry that burden of that crime, that memory. That's the right word. The memory with her for 9 months or even thereafter after the child's born. Uh, and again, let's talk about life. So to me, life begins when the child can sense things, so sense pain, knows their sound, can tell the difference in a voice between your voice and the mother's voice. I think that's important. At that point, I think that's when life begins. From a moral standpoint, that child, in my opinion, now has a moral right to live. Another instance, though, where I think that abortion would be okay would be deformities. I think if that child's going to be paralyzed for life, brain dead upon birth, those types of things, I think abortion there is acceptable. You're limiting suffering of both the parents and the child. Another thing that I think is really important is that adoption is so available and prevalent in our society. I think that with the availability of adoption in the United States, that it should be for people who just accidentally get pregnant, adoption should be the only option if they don't want to have that baby. Just not wanting to have a child when you decided to not have safe sex is not okay in my opinion. To me, that's wrong. And that's why I say adoption there. And so moving forward, this is the kind of things I want to touch on. Here you see the main reason for abortion has been poverty. Women with family income less than 100% of the federal poverty level accounted for almost half of all abortion patients in 2014. This group had the highest abortion rate of all we examined, 36.6 per thousand. As income levels increased, the abortion rate decreased. Women in the highest income group had an abortion rate less than half the national rate, 6 per 1,000. That's from Jones and German in an academic study they did in 2017. And kind of that goes back to, again, I think if you're in that poverty situation where you're not going to be able to support that child, I don't think abortion is the right answer. I think there are people willing to adopt children who can't have children or are just in better financial situations to have to raise children. And I think that's where adoption over abortion should be key. And then here you see a reduction in the amount of abortions lately. And here Jones and Germain kind of tie that to contraception and the use of contraception. So recent research suggests that most of the decline in adolescent fertility between 2007 and 2012 was a result of changes in contraceptive use, including increased reliance on long-acting reversible contraception, LARC, such as the IUD and implants. And I think it's important to, kind of like Brittany said, to be responsible, to own your choices and make the right choices. In this case, improved contraceptive use helped a lot in reducing abortions and adolescent pregnancy. In conclusion, we talked about the different viewpoints, talked about pro-life and pro-choice. We talked about my interview I had with Brittany, the knowledge I gained from that conversation, and along with my viewpoint and how I feel about abortion and its morality. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is michael.gross@sccans.edu. I'll answer any questions you guys have. Thank you so much for looking at this. The last few slides here are going to be just the references we talked about throughout this presentation, and I hope you all have a great day.